Hello, welcome. Our works for today. String quartet in F minor, opus 95, violin sonata in G major, opus 96, and piano trio in B flat major, opus 97. This is an extraction from the Groves Dictionary, also now published by Oxford, but one could here's a link to the membership. That is basically this encyclopedia, the Britannica of the music world, that's relatively up to date. If you have an affiliation with an academic place, sometimes even alum, I think, of Hopkins can gain access, but one can also purchase a membership for relatively inexpensive things. It's the funny thing is, this used to really be the gold standard for finding what was new. It would come out maybe every 20, 30 years, another new edition would come out in hard copy and hard volumes. And they sit on the reference shelves of just about any reasonable music library. The funny thing is, now with Wikipedia, which used to be something we never let students look at, the more up-to-date things live and reside in Wikipedia at times. But what I wanted to show you here are the three works, and to convey to you the importance that works, just because they're in sequence, which I've stressed before, 95, 96, 97, are the publication release sequence, but it doesn't mean that's the time that it was actually composed. And so the second column is the title of the work. The third column is when we believe it was composed based on sources. And then this is when we believe it was first performed, after the semicolon. The fourth column is the publication, where it was published, this column over here. And then this is the dedication. This is the person to whom it was dedicated. All right, so we're going to take, and I grappled with what would be the best way to present today. And I thought, let's just go in the order of opus numbers, but they were written close together, and usually they are, but sometimes Beethoven will release something at a different time. And what you see between this one, opus 96 and 97, right? This one was written circa 1812 is the version, right, because we know it was performed. He did not perform it, but it was written for these two people. Pierre Rode, who was a violinist from France. All right. What's important also to see in this time is that Archduke Rudolph is the nickname for opus 97. It's frequently called the Archduke Trio. But Archduke Rudolph was both a pupil and a patron of Beethoven. And a very important dimension of this is that he studied with Beethoven. He was a very, not only was he a benefactor in terms of financing, but he had, he understood Beethoven. I like to think of him as his musical patron / almost surrogate son in terms of musical affinity. And Beethoven dedicated some of his most advanced works to Archduke Rudolph. When he decides to dedicate a work to Archduke Rudolph, it is not an accident. All right. Opus 95 is different from 96 and 97 in that one, it was dedicated to Zmeskal von Domanovich. I think that's correct, but I might be mispronouncing it. But it's a middle period string quartet. It has a nickname of Serioso, which we'll talk about momentarily. All right. And in some ways, there's a certain kind of compositional technique of greater compression in this work, whereas 96 and 97 are far more expansive and far more lyrical. And they also represent, both 96 and 97 represent Beethoven's last efforts in these genres. He writes no more violin sonatas after this, and he writes no more piano trios after this. Moreover, while we're looking at this particular chart, this performance on April 11th, 1814, Beethoven actually played the piano. It did not go well, that performance. It did not go well. And there are many people who are going, oh, he really shouldn't be playing the piano after this. All right. I don't believe that that's the major reason he stopped writing piano trios. I've also given a paper about Beethoven's time. This time, circa 1815 to 1820, is known as the fallow, less than productive times of Beethoven's life. A lot of things were happening for him in his own world. A very nasty custody case for his nephew. And those 5 years kind of represent a time when Beethoven was not particularly productive. And then he gets a resurgence in the late period, a new surge, and he devotes his time solely to string quartets, piano sonatas, the Ninth Symphony, Missa Solemnis, and the Diabelli variations. But he stops writing certain kinds of chamber music. He stops writing for piano and violin, and he stops writing trios. He does do one more effort in a sonata for cello, Opus 102. He's been deaf. He's been deaf for a long time. He knows as he's going, he realizes that he's going deaf in the 1802s, 1803s, when he writes his famous Heiligenstadt Testament. So yes, and that is also, people recognize that he can't hear. And in fact, by this time, he's already somewhat of a celebrity, and people are making special ear devices for him to help him, right? So the composition output is still, at this point, still coming out, but yes, he can't hear, and that's one reason he can't play so well with other people.
That's what I was gonna ask.
He can't play with other people, which it doesn't mean that he's not able to compose, but he stops playing. He also stops writing concerti for pianos. So as a soloist, which we haven't talked about, it's another genre with a piano soloist against a full orchestra. Opus 73 is his last. Well, he's just published his 7th and 8th symphonies, which are Opus 92 and 93. And then again, he stops. And that 9th symphony is a long time in gestation. And so there's a time, and this is, I love to tell the student, I love to share this story, which is, one cannot always be creative every moment of the day the way one can just do an exercise at certain times. But there's a time of gestation, there's a time of pulling back. And there's a time when one decides, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I have limited time on this earth. I'm going to make the most of something else that I want to do. And he sets aside a number of genre here, right? He sets aside his violin sonatas and the piano trios. But I also believe that he recognizes that he's reached a kind of pinnacle for those particular genres. I've done it, and I've done it well. I've done it well. And what you see in both 96 and 97 is an extraordinary lyricism. They sing beautifully, and there's a poetic inward expression that I'd like to share with you today when we look at the pieces, that it's quite different from where we left off last time. Last time we left off with a kind of, I can do it, I can show off, and everything is virtuosity. That's like the late 30s. It's like at the height of creativity and very daring. This is a stepping back. It's infinitely more mature. Early 40s, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't need to show off anymore. I know what I can do. And I think that is very clear in the works. All right? Okay, let me at least share with you. Here's a Beethoven manuscript. This is the violin sonata at the Pierpont Morgan Library in New York. Why is it in New York? We don't know. This is the funny thing about Beethoven Manors. It's like, why are they in New York? I have no idea. You can see this is a score that was designed to go to the publisher. I thought this would be a kind of fun metaphor for all of us to share. We've talked about sonata form at length. All right. This is sonata form with Oreo cookies. All right. So basically you have from here to here is known as the exposition. Certain things have to happen here. Then you have to have a second theme. A first theme comes along and a second theme comes along. Then this part gets repeated. Right here is known as the recapitulation, where all of this gets mushed up. You get bits and pieces of pink and bits and pieces of the Oreo cookie from the first theme. And right here is the recapitulation. This part has to come back exactly the same way. And this little piece part where the second theme comes back in a similar way, but more like the original Oreo with a little pink in it, in the same theme area. This is somebody, a student of mine, and the link when I share, the link gives you cookie metaphors for every classical music form that you would like, which is quite cute, all right? One of the things that we see in Beethoven is that middle Beethoven, where we left off last time, is Beethoven sets this up so that it's not exactly like this. You think this cookie is over here, and then it's over here. So one of the Beethovenian strokes is to set up a recapitulation so that it's never boring. All right. And you see a similar action by his teacher Haydn in a different way. You think it's over here much bigger, and then it actually comes back later. But Beethoven almost always does something unusual when the recapitulation comes back. For those of you who know the Third Symphony, the height of Beethoven's creativity, the Eroica Symphony, there is a horn that comes in early. It comes in slightly early, and then the recapitulation comes in. And in fact, at the first performance, everybody thought the French horn was off. Oh, he's made the wrong entrance. And in fact, he actually did it deliberately. So it's highlights. So Beethoven is always playing with expectation of form. That's just something I want you all to know. Yes. Okay. The very beginning of the cello sonata, where we left off last time, was we talked about the Kreutzer violin sonata. I just want you to see a little bit of the cello, because for Beethoven, it's funny, before he does more expansion, he does tend to play with the cello in the lower register in a very adventurous way. And just as the sonata for violin, Opus 47, started with the violin and then the piano, he does exactly the same thing with this cello sonata. The cello starts first, which is a big deal. It's a huge deal. Similarly, for those of you who know the piano concerti at this time, there are 5 piano concertos. It's okay if you don't know them. But what Beethoven does in both the works, the Opus 58 and Opus 73, which are pianos concertos 4 and 5 respectively, he throws the soloist at the very beginning. This is a middle period stroke to put what you expect and invert them. All right. So I just want you to hear the very beginning of this particular sonata with Antonio Meneses and Maria Pires, who should be a better known name in the United States. She's known in Europe quite well. We're at the pink cookie. We're at the pink cookie right now. We've just turned the whole Oreo. We're at the pink cookie now. Helpful? It's an unusual piece, one that it starts with the other instrument. So the balance is shifting. Also, the mode, you might not hear it, but there's an A major, A minor shift. It's all right. It's a theory thing. It sounds happy and sad. And for the sonata, Beethoven doesn't feel the need to start it right away. It's a gradual starting, even though it's officially the exposition at the very beginning. Okay? All right, let's move a little bit to the string quartet. I'm gonna shortchange the string quartet, but we'll be spending a lot of time with string quartet in our next session. So let me go here. And what I'd like to do is play the very beginning of each movement for the string quartet with the score, and then you all get to choose whom you want to hear begin it, because I had 4 different places, different 4 different performances, but 2 of the same quartet in their early stage and their later stage. This is an unusual work. All right, I mentioned it earlier. Opus 95 serves as a segue into where we're going to go next week, which is at the end of his middle period. Beethoven is writing this quartet. It has a nickname called Serioso, which comes right here in the 3rd movement. All right, Serioso, that he feels the need to put it in, is a fascinating stroke of Beethoven's. We usually think of the 3rd movement as a lighthearted, faster work, right? And we also, the word scherzo is used as a joke. And Beethoven's indication that he wants serioso is the point that he's trying to make is, I'm serious here. This is meant to be serious. All right. You may also hear a different kind of writing. Everything is compressed. This is not the lyrical work. 96 and 97 represent lyrical expansion, but also the end of a time. 95 compressed, lots of ideas, somewhat dissonant. He's really gaining command with string writing for all 4 strings, which is part of the reason I wanted you all to see a score. And even if you're not a reader of music, what I'd like you to see is just the density of notes going on and who's playing at a given time. All right, so we're just going to play the beginning of each movement. Pink cookie. All right. Whole first theme. Dense, turbulent, tremendous command of all of the voices, greater equality. We talked a little bit about the earlier string quartet, Opus 59-1, in which the cello, again, leads, but you see more equality with all of the voices. You see a lot more activity between the second and violin and the viola also. See, he's playing with, what am I going to do with these 4 instruments? How do I make the most out of all 4 of them without one dominating over the other? Let's play the very beginning of the 2nd movement. A fugue. Second violin coming in. Cello coming in for here. Violin finally. All right, and then the cello is starting over again. All right. Fugal passage, if you don't know, there's an equality of voices, there's imitation that takes place. Don't worry about the technical term. Just think of Sudoku. You know, the Sudoku puzzles where you have to have crossword puzzles. They have to line up. You got one entrance, another entrance, but they all have to line up vertically in certain principles in order for it to work. And the same way that you have consonants and consonants and vowels that must line up, you have dissonances and consonances that must line up in a certain way for it to make grammatical sense in Western music. Okay, beginning of the third movement, our serioso movement. He means it. It's not meant to be funny. He's trying to say something more turbulent and concentrated. And notice that they're all working together. And you also recognize it takes more virtuosity to play this properly. We saw a lot of it in the last Opus 59-1. Greater virtuosity individually. Now there's virtuosity to pull them all together at the same time. Okay. And just a little bit of the last movement, which starts out slow with the slow section. Now, there's fully all right. I don't have them cued to the individual movements, but the Tokyo String Quartet, which disbanded in 2013, Emerson when they were really young, Emerson more recently with a changed cello player, and the Belcher Quartet. By the way, only the inner voices of the original, well, actually only the violist is the original Tokyo String Quartet member from the very beginning. Second violin there was there for a very long time. First violinist Martin Beaver and cellist Clive Greensmith. They're both at the Colburn School. You heard a little bit of Martin play with them last time, and they're producing amazing kids. In fact, their quartet just won the Banff International Quartet last year. So I'm going to try to find them for next week. All right, they're adorable kids, dude. But this is in, I think, 2012, the very beginning, just the very beginning. at 92nd Y. There you go. Have to stop it at a cadence. It's very hard to find a spot. And funny thing about Beethoven, his cadences elide differently as he gets older, and finding a place to stop gets that much harder. It's much easier because the way he writes music with space between the phrases in a much more clearer way disappears as he gets older. Things get overlapped in a unique way. All right. Okay. This will be on your slides for you all to take a longer look, and we can start. That's your homework. Compare Opus 59s and tell me what you all think. All right. We covered most of this. Main points for Opus 59 and other works around this time: compressed. All right. Only quartet with suggestion for a directed term in the movement. Okay. And remember what from that other chart that I showed you on your Google Doc, opus numbers, composition dates, not necessarily at the same time, approximate, but not necessarily. And then just for your benefit, that Beethoven's fallow period, when he was not the most productive, 1815 through 1820. All right. You've seen the autograph of this. Let me play. Here's what I'd like to do for this particular work. Opus 96 is the last of his sonatas for violin and piano, or piano and violin, officially at that time. I'd like you to think about the beginning of the first movement and how different it is from the in terms of virtuosity. It is elegant, lovely, but he doesn't have to show off. And the sound world for the piano resembles other works that he has dedicated to the Archduke Rudolph. All right. The person who performed it on the first performance was Archduke Rudolph and a violinist by the name of Pierre Rode. I'm going to do my pretentious French, rolled R. Some people call him Rode if they're being very American, but it is Rode, and I can do that. I practiced my uvular R so much when I was in 9th grade that I have to show it off every once in a while. Pierre Rode, c'est vrai. But what we also know is that he himself was not at his peak as a virtuoso violinist. So there are suggestions that Beethoven made the violin part slightly less difficult. He actually he wrote some of the last movement first, which is a theme in variations, but it's not necessarily, it is not as, doesn't require as much effort and virtuosity in speed, but actually what it requires is maturity to pull this off, to perform it with success. I'd like to play the first movement and then a little bit of the second movement. All right, let me play the first movement, and I would like you just to think about how different it sounds. And I am going to use the score now, but I have a lovely performance of Benjamin Beilman, who's a lovely violinist, making his way in the world. So maybe we'll start. We'll play the very beginning from the score. We'll play a little bit of the second movement, and then I'll move to a performer. we're going toward the pink cookie right now in terms of the second theme, but we've just done part of the original first cookie, if we're going to use that metaphor. Let me play, is it down here without my having to shift? Yeah. Before I play this, let me just, piano starts. When the violin comes here, it says sotto voce. Listen to this tune, violin. It corresponds with the word Lebewohl, which is farewell. There's an entire sonata that starts with Lebewohl, goodbye, that was written by Beethoven earlier. I've written at length, I gave a paper in Manchester about this. I believe that this is a deliberate invocation of Beethoven saying goodbye. All right, all right. So the piano starts, and then the piano comes in. Main points, 4 movements. Dedication begins with the trill, modest and turbulent, saying goodbye. Let's play the very beginning of it. Violin about to come in. I'm going to stop it before the cadence, because what I'd like you to see is how this violin is playing on its own. And the piano actually is not playing on the notes. It is deliberately accompanying. It's slightly off. So the piano, the string player plays and the piano comes in, but the articulation happens in such a way that it allows the string to sing in a very different way. Quite lyrical, quite beautiful. Mm-hmm. Let's just play a little bit of Benjamin, because he's such a lovely player. I just think he's such a, Gidon Kramer, Martha Argerich, fabulous too. Glenn Gould, Menuhin, an old recording, but I do think Benjamin's just a kind of a, this is a lovely trio. And in fact, I believe they played at the Shriver series at Peabody a couple of years ago. Benjamin Beilman, Orion Weiss, lovely players. I heard them play in Philadelphia before. Benjamin won all of his competitions in Montreal. just lovely, elegant playing for such young people also. I don't know how they pull it off, but they do. So I just thought I'd give you a little bit. It's nice to see them play aside from the score, right? To see the score and then see it realized by some lovely players, right? Okay. Archduke Trio, again, more lyricism, great lyricism. Piano dominates, but there's greater command of the accompanying instruments. But this is Beethoven's last effort in this particular work. And let me see, why don't we play the very beginning, and then, like the other middle movements, Beethoven goes from the third movement straight into the finale, which is a beautiful structural move, but it's also beautifully rendered by this particular group of players. They belong to something called Camerata Pacifica, which is on the West Coast. For all of you on the West Coast, the Music Academy of the West, let me encourage you to go out there in the summer whenever they revive themselves. This is not the summer during COVID, but they have some of the most glorious players. It is just the most beautiful festival in the world. And a lot of the people we've shown today, they show up there too. All right, so let me just play the very beginning of the Archduke Trio. Look at this though. Nobody's using paper anymore. Man's got an iPad, which is both wonderful and a little treacherous in my view, because if it goes out, you better have it under his fingers. All right, so let's just play the very beginning. And you'll see the expanse of the instruments. And then I'm going to play going into the last movement. of the exposition. Beautiful production values. Somebody knows what they're doing. They have a good TV crew over there because they move from instrument to instrument. Somebody has studied the score. They've decided where to go in various parts. If you were to take a look at where the edits are. Beautiful playing. But you can also see that Beethoven still works with piano and the two stringed instruments in some ways opposition to one another. But the string writing is far more elegant than it was earlier with the piano. Let us move structurally into the third movement. So we can just see the third movement moving straight into the finale. Last movement. Return of the material. All right. Questions? Can you hear? I didn't spend as much time on the lyrical qualities other than the inner movements, but I think you can see, especially the first movement of the Archduke Trio, that everything is being stretched. He doesn't rush anymore. He doesn't need to rush. There comes a point in a composer's output, I don't need to do that anymore. I know what I'm doing now. He doesn't need to show off. It's just elegance, sheer elegance, and joy also, at least at the end of that one. I think he had a preference when it came to C major and C minor. Frequently, that was a big, I'm going to do something different. I think when it's purely strings, he does play with F major and F minor. I do think that there's something, if you look at the ones, even just the ones that we studied, first of all, F major and F minor fits into strings well. All right. F minor, though, does not. F minor is more of a better piano key than it is a string key. So when he's doing F minor, he's playing with the sound world, which you don't have open strings as much. G major is a marvelous key for the violin because it's the lowest string on the violin is a G. And that means that you have a G, a D, an A, and an E. And those fifths will ring and resonate in a certain way. So G major sits well. G major and D major or D minor sit well on the violin. It's not an accident that many violin concerti are written in D major or D minor because it leaves open strings for a certain resonance. All right. Symphonies and keys in E flat fit well in the piano. They sit really well if you have brass instruments, lots of flats. For orchestral things, E flat's going to ring a certain way. Let's see, did I add anything? B flat. B flat is neither a great key, it's an okay key, but it's not a particular, it's a great key for brass instruments, but B flat, that he's just, I think he's just playing with the piano. He's moving toward a piano sonata that's well known. It's known as the Hammerklavier in B flat. But what you'll see also is that he changes keys dramatically to push the limits of the instrument and the players when we look at the string quartets. He'll shift keys in the middle frequently. He's already done it a few times here, but we'll see it in a different way. Any other questions? Did you like certain recordings more than the others? In fact, the score for the string quartet, even though we were looking at the score, that was also the Emerson quartet in the background. Do you all have a preference? I try to go sort of the range of recordings. YouTube has changed the way one can teach in so many ways. I think the fun thing that we could do in a different way is if we were just focusing on one configuration, either string quartets or violin sonata or cello sonata, you can look at the different techniques of the players. I've known many players who can sit in a competition and they'll hear the students play and they'll say, that student plays with this particular teacher and that one must be that student's. It's amazing. I'll just say, I've sat with performers who'll go, does that person study with X and that one Y? When I used to be at the prep and I would run the competitions and I go, how do you know? He goes, I just know. They know. And the technique is beautiful to see. You can see the lifts of the bow on the right hand. Certain people have a certain way of releasing. I've been fairly deliberate in the way I've chosen the performances. Take good care. See you in a week.